Hello everybody, there is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. In this tutorial we will discuss authentication and authorization with JWT and Node.js. By the end of this tutorial you will be able to develop an authentication and authorization layer for any web application using JWT and Node.js. Okay, by the end of this tutorial you will be able to develop this API, this login API used for authentication, and user API, it's a get API used for getting the current session information. Okay, when trying to log in without username and password, as you can see, username and password is required. When trying to log in by entering a wrong credential, as you can see, login field, check your username and password. And if we try to log in using a correct username and password, the server responds by a assigned JWT token. Okay, this is the authentication layer. And for the user API, it's authorized API. Okay, if we try to access this API, as you can see, unauthorized. So to access this API, we should send the authorization in the header. Okay, and this is the token generated here. After click send, as you can see, this is the information, the payload, the information related to the current session. First name Ahmad, last name Mahmoud. Try to log in using another username, another account, password 1234. Okay, username Muhammad, password 1234. Okay, now get this token, send in the header. As you can see, ID is 1, first name Muhammad, ID 1, first name Muhammad, last name Ali, last name Ali. Okay, so user authentication and authorization, one of the most important part of any web application. Users can authenticate themselves before gaining any access to authorized resources or protected views. In this article we will learn the following terms. By example, the difference between authentication and authorization, what JWT, their structure, their usage, advantages of using JWT, and the second part is the implementation part. Okay, it's step by step using Node.js and JWT from scratch. As you can see, this is the implementation part. Okay, so if you don't have any knowledge about JWT, don't worry. In this article we will learn JWT by developing a project. Okay, but for the implementation part you should have a previous experience with Node.js, ES6 and REST API. Now, what is the difference between authentication and authorization? As you can see, authentication, who you are. Authentication process usually done before authorization. When you try to enter your username, credential, your credential, username and password, okay, and the system identify you, this process is called authentication. Okay, authorization, what you can do, your permission to access the resources. Authorization determines what users can and can't access, and usually done after successful authentication. Okay, What are JWT? JWT stands for JSON Web Token and have been introduced as a method of communicating between two parties in a secure way. JWT is mostly used for handling authentication and authorization via HTTP nowadays. First, we should know some information about HTTP. HTTP protocol is a stateless protocol, which means that HTTP doesn't maintain the state. The server doesn't know about any previous request sent by the same client. So that HTTP request should be self-contained. They should include information about the previous requests that the user made and the request itself. There are few ways of making HTTP self-contained. By using the first way, by using a session ID. The second way is using JWT. By using the session ID is a reference to the user information. The server will store session ID in a memory or in a database. Then the client will send each request, okay, with the session ID, and the server can fetch the information about the client, okay, using this reference. Okay. The second way is using JWT. The client sends an authentication request to the server. It will send, the server will respond with a signed JWT token, which includes information about the user, okay, in the response. This signed token already contains information about the user in the payload. Okay, we will discuss this after finishing this part. The client sends this token along with all the request. Server doesn't store any information about the session. As you can see in session ID stored in the database, and when the server try to identify or fetch user data by this session ID. Okay, but in this case the user data already exists in the token itself, so the server doesn't store any information about the session. Structure of JWT. The structure of JWT consists of three parts. The first part is the header. In the header, the hashing algorithm and also the type. The second part is the payload, which contains encoded data. It's base encode. Okay. So this encoded data can easily be decoded by anyone because it's base encode. Okay, so it's highly recommended not to include any important data in JWT payload, like password or personal information. Okay, it's highly recommended. The third part is the signature. Okay, this is generated by hashing the string base of header, base encode of header, base encode of payload, and the secret. Okay, is a random string saved. Only the server should know. You shouldn't share this secret with anyone. Okay. Now the advantages of using JWT. Before discussing the advantages of JWT, as we mentioned before, secret is a random string, only the server should know, and no hash can be converted back to the original text, and even a small change of the original string will result in a different hash. So the secret can't be reversed. It's highly secured. Okay, okay. Advantages of using JWT. JWT can contains all information about user in the payload, unlike session ID. This is very useful for scaling web apps, for the environment or microservice application. Why? Okay, because the session ID, by using the session ID, okay, the traditional method, we have to share a database between these services to share the information between the services about the user itself. But if we are using JWT, we can only share the secret between the services. No need for external resources. So this is the main advantages of using JWT. No need for using external resources. Only sharing the secret key between the services, the microservices, and each service will be able to decrypt the token and fetching the user data from decoding the payload itself. Okay, okay. And this is the first part. We have discussed difference between authentication and authorization, JWT, structure and usage, advantages of using JWT, and this is the implementation part we will discuss later. Okay, don't forget like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.